In the cold, unforgiving calculus of modern naval warfare, there exists a terrifying imbalance. A single anti-ship missile costing perhaps $4 million can travel at 3 times the speed of sound, skimming just feet above the churning waves, guided by a labyrinth of sensors and GPS coordinates. Its target, a $7 billion guided missile destroyer, a floating fortress of steel and sovereign territory, home to 300 souls. In the final seconds of its flight, the missile becomes a 4,000-pound kinetic battering ram, tipped with an explosive warhead designed to pierce military-grade armor and turn the ship's own fuel and munitions into a secondary, catastrophic explosion. The exchange is brutally mathematically unfair. It's the hornet against the elephant. And for the United States Navy, the most powerful maritime force the world has ever known, this simple, horrifying equation became an obsession at the dawn of the 21st century. It was an existential threat that haunted the dreams of admirals in the Pentagon and the waking thoughts of engineers in silent, windowless design labs. How do you protect an elephant from a swarm of hornets? The answer, they believed, was not to build a stronger elephant. It was to build a ghost. To understand the birth of this ghost, this vessel of breathtaking ambition and ultimately ruinous cost, one must first understand the world that summoned it. The Cold War had ended not with a bang, but with the quiet, anticlimactic crumbling of a wall. The great adversary, the Soviet Union and its massive blue water fleet, had rusted into obsolescence. For the first time in nearly half a century, the US Navy found itself without a peer competitor, an undisputed king of the open ocean. A sense of triumphalism settled over Washington. History, it was said, had ended. The American model had won. And with this victory came the promise of a peace dividend, a belief that the colossal defense budgets of the Cold War could be redirected to domestic priorities. The nation, it seemed, was ready to turn inward, but the world, as it always does, refused to be so simple. While the great clash of superpowers had faded, the globe was fracturing into 1,000 smaller, messier conflicts. The clean lines of the Cold War map, with its stark reds and blues, were replaced by a chaotic canvas of failed states, non-state actors, and regional powers with newfound ambition. The enemy was no longer a predictable monolith. It was nimble, asymmetric, and unpredictable. It was a Somali pirate in a cheap fiberglass skiff armed with a rocket-propelled grenade. It was a terrorist cell operating out of a coastal port. It was a rogue state's small diesel-electric submarine hiding in the noisy, shallow waters of a strategic strait. The new battleground was not the deep blue of the North Atlantic, but the murky, littoral zones, the cluttered, contested coastlines where more than 80% of the world's population lives, and where global commerce flows like blood through vital arteries. For the American Navy, this was a paradigm shift of seismic proportions. Its entire fleet, its very identity, had been forged in the crucible of a singular mission: to find and destroy the Soviet Navy in a massive, decisive battle on the high seas. Its Arleigh-Burke-class destroyers and Ticonderoga-class cruisers were magnificent instruments of power, bristling with missiles and radars designed for that one epic fight. They were the heavyweight champions of the world, but now they were being asked to do the work of a street-fighting brawler. They were being sent into the dangerous, constricted waters close to shore, where their size made them conspicuous targets, and their powerful long-range radars could be confused by the clutter of land and civilian traffic. They were designed to hear a whisper in a silent concert hall, but the new fight was taking place in the middle of a screaming rock concert. The Navy's great dreadnoughts were suddenly at risk of death by 1,000 paper cuts. Out of this strategic anxiety, a radical new vision began to coalesce. It was whispered at first in strategy papers and classified briefings, then spoken with increasing confidence. What if, the thinking went, we could make the next leap? What if we could build a ship that rendered the old equation of missile versus ship obsolete? The answer wasn't more armor or more defensive weapons. The answer was to not be seen at all, to become invisible. This was the genesis of the Zumwalt-class destroyer, a ship that was less a successor to its predecessors and more a creature from another dimension. It was conceived not as an evolution, but as a revolution, a technological silver bullet, for the messy problems of a new century. The promises were intoxicating, torn from the pages of science fiction. It would have a radar cross-section less than that of a small fishing boat. On an enemy's screen, this 16,000-ton behemoth of a warship, longer than 2 football fields, would appear as a faint, insignificant blip, easily lost in the background noise of the waves. Its unique tumble-home hull, with sides that sloped inward, was designed to deflect radar waves away from their source, like the faceted skin of a stealth bomber. Its guns would be revolutionary. A pair of massive advanced gun systems capable of firing rocket-assisted, GPS-guided projectiles over 80 miles with pinpoint accuracy, delivering the power of a warship's broadside deep inland. It would be a ship of ghosts, crewed by a skeleton force of less than half its predecessors, thanks to a level of automation never before seen at sea. A vast integrated power system would generate enough electricity to one day power the next generation of weaponry. Lasers and railguns, weapons of pure energy. It wasn't just a ship, it was a statement, a declaration that American technological supremacy was not only intact, but accelerating into an unassailable future. It was the physical manifestation of a concept that had gripped the Pentagon, the revolution in military affairs, the belief that advanced technology could create a smaller, smarter, more lethal fighting force that could dominate any adversary, anywhere, anytime. The Zumwalt was to be the flagship of this new technological faith, a cathedral of computation and composite materials. It was America's answer to the chaos of the post-Cold War world, a clean, elegant technological solution to a series of dirty human problems. And in the heady, optimistic years at the turn of the millennium, it seemed not only possible, but necessary. It was an article of faith. But faith alone cannot bend steel or generate a megawatt of electricity. To turn this techno-religious vision into a physical object, a 16,000-ton reality of welded plates and humming circuits required a feat of engineering so profound it bordered on the hubristic. The promises made in the Pentagon's conference rooms had to be translated into blueprints, then into the unforgiving language of physics and thermodynamics. And it was here, in the engine rooms and computer labs, that the true, staggering scale of the Zumwalt project began to reveal itself. At its core, the ship wasn't a vessel in the traditional sense. It was a floating power grid, a self-contained mobile utility company designed for combat. The heart of this beast was the Integrated Power System, or IPS. This was the central nervous system from which all else flowed. In a conventional warship, propulsion and ship services are 2 separate kingdoms. Giant diesel or gas turbine engines are mechanically linked through complex gearboxes to the propeller shafts, a brute force system of controlled explosions and spinning metal that has powered ships for a century. The ship's lights, radars and computers run on a smaller, separate electrical grid powered by diesel generators. The Zumwalt obliterated this model. It was built around a unified, ship-wide electrical grid of staggering capacity. The prime movers were 2 colossal Rolls-Royce MT-30 main turbine generators, marine derivatives of the same engine that powers the Boeing 777 airliner. Each of these behemoths, on its own, could generate 36 megawatts of power. They were supplemented by 2 smaller Rolls-Royce RR4500 turbine generators, each adding another 4 megawatts, for a ship-wide total of 78 megawatts. To put that figure in perspective, it is enough electricity to power over 50,000 American homes. It was a level of onboard power generation never before conceived for a surface combatant, an order of magnitude beyond its predecessors. This vast electrical ocean was then directed wherever it was needed. There were no mechanical drive shafts connecting engines to propellers. Instead, the grid fed 2 colossal advanced induction motors, or AIMs, built by Alstom. These were 13-foot-tall, 300-ton electric motors, each one turning a propeller shaft with silent, relentless torque. This turbo-electric drive meant the ship could divert power with the flip of a switch. It could crawl silently on a fraction of its power, or, in theory, divert the full output of one of the main MT-30 turbines, 36 megawatts, directly into a future weapon system, all while still cruising at a respectable speed. The entire system was a bet on the future, an energy infrastructure built for the lasers and railguns that did not yet exist. It was an elegant, flexible, and breathtakingly complex solution. It also meant that the Zumwalt was less a warship with a power plant and more a power plant that happened to be shaped like a warship. The demands of this system rippled through every aspect of the ship's design. To feed these turbines, the Zumwalt had to carry a colossal amount of fuel. Its tanks were designed to hold over 2 million gallons of F-76 marine diesel, a weight of more than 7,000 metric tons. At a cruising speed of 20 knots, its turbines would consume this fuel at a rate of roughly 3,500 gallons per hour. The logistics of replenishing this fuel at sea, connecting this stealth-optimized hull to a traditional fleet oiler, presented its own unique set of challenges. And the heat generated by this process was immense. The ship required a sophisticated cooling system, circulating thousands of gallons of fluid through intricate heat exchangers to prevent its own core from melting down. Then there was the automation, the ghost in this magnificent machine. The promise of a skeleton crew of just 147 sailors, down from over 300 on an Burke-class destroyer, was a central pillar of the ship's cost-saving rationale. But this wasn't just about replacing lookouts with cameras. It meant re-engineering the very metabolism of a ship at sea. Take something as basic as food. For a 90-day deployment, a crew of 147, consuming an average of 3,500 calories per person per day, would require over 46 million calories. This translates to roughly 5.5 pounds of food and packaging per person per day, or almost 73,000 pounds of provisions for a 3-month voyage. On a traditional ship, a large contingent of culinary specialists manages this. On the Zumwalt, the galleys were highly automated, designed for maximum efficiency with minimal staff. Supply lines for everything from toilet paper to missile components had to be rethought for a smaller crew that had less time for manual labor. The ship itself had to be the stevedore. Water was a similar calculation. At a conservative estimate of 50 gallons per person per day for drinking, cooking, and hygiene, the crew required nearly 7,500 gallons of fresh water daily. This was produced by a bank of high-capacity reverse osmosis purifiers, turning salt water into fresh water, another critical system placing a constant demand on the ship's power grid. Every system was interconnected in this delicate, high-stakes dance of energy and consumption. The ship's waste, both human and material, was processed through advanced shredders, compactors, and a plasma gasification system that could reduce solid waste to an inert slag, a technology more at home in a futuristic city than on the high seas. And nowhere was this radical integration of man, machine, and logistics more apparent than in the ship's primary weapon, the two 155mm advanced gun systems. These were not mere cannons. They were fully automated, water-cooled artillery factories. Below each gun mount sat a vast robotic magazine. Here, 225-pound projectiles and modular propellant charges were stored in palletized units. When a fire mission was called, a series of robotic lifts, conveyors, and transfer arms would select the correct projectile, the so-called long-range land attack projectile, or LR-LAP, and the precise number of propellant charges needed for the range. It would assemble the complete round, feed it into the gun's breech, and await the command to fire, all without a single human hand touching the ammunition. The system was designed to fire 10 rounds per minute, a sustained barrage of satellite-guided shells raining down on a target 83 miles away. It was an engineering marvel. It was also an engineering nightmare. The complexity was breathtaking, a symphony of sensors, motors, and software, each component a potential point of failure. The supply chain for this single-use, hyper-sophisticated ammunition was a logistician's fever dream. Each LR-LAP was essentially a small missile, a delicate package of rocketry, guidance systems, and high explosives. The cost and complexity of this single component would come to haunt the entire program. Every single bolt, every line of code, every calorie accounted for was part of a machine so exquisitely complex it was threatening to collapse under the weight of its own ambition. But for the 147 sailors who called this steel island home, the ambition of the designers was a cold and distant star. They were the ghosts in this machine, the human operators of a vessel that aspired to operate itself. The promise was of a smaller crew, a higher quality of life, a workload managed not by muscle and sweat, but by algorithms and automated arms. The ship was sold as a step into the future, but for those living within its bulkheads, it often felt like a step into a void. The machine was a marvel, but a machine does not feel the chill that seeps through a steel deck. It does not know the gnawing emptiness of a stomach, or the particular kind of despair that comes from staring at a weapon that cannot fire. The true cost of this breathtaking complexity was not measured in dollars, but in the quiet, unseen suffering of its crew. There was the cold. It was a living thing aboard that ship, a constant presence that the vessel's own intricate systems seemed to cultivate. The ship's integrated power system was a marvel of efficiency, designed to shunt massive amounts of energy to wherever it was needed most. To the engines for a burst of speed, to the radar arrays, to the silent, waiting guns. But power was a zero-sum game. In the endless simulations and war games, when the ship was pushed to its theoretical limits, the calculus of survival deemed certain systems non-essential. And the first to be sacrificed was always comfort. A young electronics technician, barely 20 years old, remembered a drill in the North Atlantic. The simulation was a high-threat environment. The ship diverted power, throttling back the energy flowing to the HVAC systems in the crew berthing areas. His compartment, shared with 11 other sailors, became a cold locker. The recycled air grew frigid, then damp. Condensation began to weep down the grey-painted bulkheads, tracing lines like tears. He could see his own breath, a pale ghost in the low light of his rack. They wore every piece of clothing they had, sleeping in fleece jackets and watch caps, but the cold was relentless. It sank into their bones. It was a deep, invasive chill that no blanket could stop, the cold of the deep ocean bleeding through the hull itself. They were living inside the most advanced warship ever built, a multi-billion-dollar predator, yet they were shivering in their beds like homeless men on a city grate, their teeth chattering in the dark. When they complained, the answer came back from Damage Control Central. Conserve power for the mission. Deal with it. The mission was a computer simulation. The cold was real. Then there was the hunger. The galley was meant to be a masterpiece of logistical engineering. Food was stored in vast refrigerated spaces on standardized pallets, retrieved by robotic cranes and delivered to the cooks with minimal human effort. The inventory was tracked by a complex software system that knew every potato, every bag of flour, every single serving packet of ketchup. It was designed to be flawless. But one day, deep in the Pacific, thousands of miles from the nearest port, the system decided it was perfect, and reality disagreed. A sensor failed. A line of code looped back on itself. The inventory system reported full stores of perishable goods, milk, eggs, fresh vegetables. The robotic crane, obeying its digital master, refused to retrieve any more because its data insisted there was already plenty in the forward pantry. But the pantry was empty. The cooks knew it, their stomachs knew it, but the ship did not. For 3 weeks, the crew lived on what could be manually accessed: flour, rice, and canned beans. Breakfast was a pasty gruel. Lunch and dinner were some variation of the same. The smell of bean burritos, once a welcome change, became a scent of deprivation. Morale, already fragile, began to decay. Food on a ship is more than sustenance. It is a ritual, a comfort, a reminder of a world beyond the endless horizon of water and steel. To lose that is to lose a piece of your humanity. The crew grew listless, irritable, tempers frayed, jokes fell flat. Men who had been friends began to eye each other with suspicion over a hoarded candy bar. They were adrift on a technological titan, a ship with the power to level a city from over the horizon, and they were slowly starving because of a faulty sensor that cost less than $1. But the ultimate insult, the one that hollowed out the very soul of the ship and its crew, was the silence of its guns. The 2 advanced gun systems were the ship's reason for being. They were the mailed fists, the entire justification for the vessel's radical, stealthy design. Gunners' mates had spent years of their lives training to operate these weapons. They learned the intricacies of the automated magazines, The ballistics of the long-range land attack projectile, the complex fire control systems that could land a 225-pound shell on a target the size of a pickup truck from 83 miles away. They were masters of a phantom weapon, because the LR-LAP, the custom-made rocket-assisted GPS-guided ammunition, had been deemed too expensive. The cost for a single round had spiraled to nearly $1 million, so the Navy simply stopped buying them. The production line was shut down. There were no more bullets for the supergun. A chief gunner's mate described standing in the ship's mission control center during a live fire exercise. On the screens before him, a simulated enemy coastline was dotted with targets. He and his team went through the motions, their fingers flying across the consoles. They identified the target, programmed the firing solution, and brought the guns to a state of readiness. Below their feet, they could hear the deep hum as the giant gun mounts rotated into position. The robotic magazines were awake, their systems running diagnostics, their transfer arms poised to act. And then, nothing. The order to fire never came. It couldn't. The magazines were empty. They had always been empty. It was the most profound and expensive pantomime in military history. The ship, this apex predator, was a toothless shark. All its stealth, all its power, all its revolutionary technology was in service of two massive, inert cannons that could do nothing but point menacingly at the sky. For the sailors who had dedicated themselves to that system, the feeling was not anger, but a deep, corrosive futility. They were guardians of an empty promise, priests in a silent temple, their skills and their service rendered utterly meaningless by a budget line item. The cold could be endured, the hunger could be overcome, but the knowledge that your primary purpose was a lie, that was a cost the designers had never entered into their calculations. This silent, hollow drill, this elaborate pantomime of war, was not just a crisis of morale for the crew of the USS Zumwalt. It was a symptom of a much deeper malady, a rot that had set in at the very foundation of the program. The turning point for this ship, the moment its grand destiny fractured, was not in the heat of a fictional battle on a computer screen, but in the cold, fluorescent-lit reality of a logistics meeting. It was a death by 1,000 calculations, a quiet surrender not to an enemy fleet, but to the relentless tyranny of the spreadsheet. The entire existence of the DDG-1000 class was predicated on a single solemn promise: naval gunfire support. It was a promise made in blood and salt water to the United States Marine Corps. For decades, the Marines had relied on the big guns of battleships and cruisers to soften up enemy coastlines, to shatter bunkers and artillery positions before they hit the beaches. When the last of the Iowa-class battleships were retired, a void was created, a vulnerability the Marines felt in their bones. The Zumwalt, with its two colossal advanced gun systems, was meant to be the answer. It was designed to be the ultimate guardian of the amphibious assault, a silent angel of death that could rain down 1,000 shells a day in support of troops on the ground. But while the engineers at Bath Iron Works were perfecting the ship's stealth and the scientists at BAE Systems were crafting the miracle of the LR-LP projectile, the world changed. The very nature of warfare shifted under their feet. The age of the massive Normandy-style beach invasion, the kind of conflict the Zumwalt was built to dominate, was fading into the pages of history. The new doctrine was one of precision, of standoff capabilities, of smaller, more agile forces, and the pervasive threat of anti-ship missiles that could turn any vessel close to shore into a billion-dollar reef. The battlefield had dematerialized. It was no longer a clearly defined coastline to be pounded into submission. It had moved into the shadows, into cyberspace, into the calculus of hypersonic weapons and drone swarms. The promise made to the Marines was becoming a promise the Pentagon no longer felt it needed to keep. The core mission, the ship's entire reason for being, was evaporating like sea spray in the wind, and so the death blow came not with a bang, but with the stroke of a pen. The original order for 32 of these revolutionary ships, a fleet of specters to haunt every coastline on Earth, was slashed. Then it was slashed again. The final number was not 32, not even 10. It was 3, just 3, a trinity of ghosts. This decision triggered a catastrophic logistical collapse. The entire economic model for the ship and its weapons was based on the economies of scale that a 32-ship run would provide. With only 3 ships, the cost for every unique component, every specialized spare part skyrocketed. The million-dollar price tag for the LR-LAP ammunition wasn't just a case of runaway spending. It was the direct result of having to spread the massive research and development costs over a tiny handful of shells instead of the tens of thousands originally planned. The gun was a masterpiece of engineering. The ammunition was a technological marvel. But the program had become an orphan, and orphans are expensive to keep. The Navy was now the reluctant guardian of 3 of the most advanced, most expensive, and most functionally useless warships ever to touch water. But the cost is not only measured in dollars. To see the other ledger, you must travel to the coast of Maine to the banks of the Kennebec River. Here, at Bath Iron Works, generations of families have built the ships that have defined American sea power. Their hands have shaped the steel of destroyers that fought at Midway and cruisers that patrolled the Cold War frontiers. It is a place of pride, of skill passed down from father to son, from mother to daughter. The river itself seems to hold the memory of 1,000 launchings in its cold, dark currents. When the DDG-1000 program arrived, it felt like the future had come to this old place. To build this ship, with its radical inward-sloping tumble-home hull, a structure no one had ever attempted on this scale, a new facility had to be constructed. They called it the Ultra Hall. It was a gargantuan, climate-controlled building, a cathedral of steel and light rising on the riverbank. It was a testament to the program's ambition, a $100 million bet on a new era of shipbuilding. Inside, massive sections of the Zumwalt could be assembled horizontally, protected from the brutal Maine winters, then lifted by colossal cranes and carried out to the water. The Ultra Hall was the womb for this new species of warship. Today, that great building still stands, but it is a place of deep and profound quiet. The grand production line it was built to house never materialized. After the 3 ships were completed, the work for which it was designed simply ended. It is now a ghost hangar, a monument to a cancelled future. The wind from the Atlantic whistles through its vast, empty bays. The silence inside is a heavy thing, broken only by the distant clang of work on more conventional ships nearby. For the people of Bath, the building is a constant physical reminder of the promise that was broken. It is a scar on the land, a landmark of what might have been, a symbol of a grand vision that faltered, leaving behind not a fleet, but an echo. So what becomes of such a thing? This vessel born of such brilliance and such hubris? The USS Zumwalt and its 2 sisters still sail the oceans. They are test beds for new technologies, platforms for experimentation, but they will never be the heralds of a new fleet. They are destined to remain a class of 3, forever unique, forever outliers. They are ghosts of a future that never was, a future where technology alone was believed to be the answer, where the complexities of cost, strategy, and a changing world were seen as minor details to be worked out later. The ship is not a failure of engineering. It is, in almost every technical sense, a marvel. It is a failure of foresight, a cautionary tale written in $32 billion of steel and circuits. It is proof that the most advanced weapon can be rendered obsolete, not by a rival power, but by the quiet, inexorable march of time. It teaches a hard lesson, that you can build a perfect key, a masterful, intricate, and impossibly expensive key, but it is utterly worthless if the lock has already been changed. The 3 Zumwalt-class destroyers sail on, magnificent and menacing, their empty magazines a silent testament to their hollow purpose. They are the 3 loneliest ships in the ocean, a magnificent floating monument to a $32 billion blunder.